Hello, and thank you for joining us here at Ask a Historian. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga. And this week, we are thrilled to be joined by Dorothy Kew, the former local history librarian at the Mississauga Library System and a longtime member of the Halton Peel Branch of Ontario Ancestors, formerly the Ontario Genealogical Society. And we will explore kind of what a Halton Peel does and how they're involved in the community and how to connect with them here on Ask a Historian this week.
Joining me this week on Ask a Historian is Dorothy Kew, and Dorothy is retired now, but has been a long-time local history librarian with the Mississauga Library System. And outside of her work at the library, where Dorothy was a tremendous resource for all of us who work in the local history community. But Dorothy has also been a longtime volunteer with the Halton Peel a branch of Ontario Ancestors, also the Ontario Genealogical Society, where, amongst other things, she heads up the cemeteries. I was going to say cemeteries division, but that's the wrong word, but the cemeteries committee. And we're going to talk about that because that's absolutely fascinating as well. So thank you, Dorothy, for joining us here on Ask a Historian.
Thank you, Matthew, for the opportunity.
Well, I always enjoy talking to you, and I'm fascinated to explore some of the topics of what rolls off the tongue. And I know a lot of people who might be listening to it knew it as and still refer to it as OGS or Ontario Genealogical Society.
That's right. Yeah.
Halton Peel is a local branch of a wider provincial organization and has rebranded themselves, the province organization, as Ontario Ancestors. So they are interchangeable. They're the same organization. So I'm wondering if you can give me a brief history on the branch itself. Halton Peel, when did it form? Why? That kind of thing. I'm just wondering if you can walk us through a little bit of the story of Halton Peel.
Okay. OGS itself, the Ontario Genealogical Society, was formed in 1961. And Halton Peel Branch was formed actually in 1974.
Okay.
And I guess the idea of putting the two together, they started with meetings held in Georgetown, Halton, and in Brampton for Peel. And they finalized the whole idea of becoming a branch in November of 1974. And they had a meeting in Oakville at that time, which, if I'm not mistaken, was the old Trafalgar. There was this building at the corner of Trafalgar and Dundas Street. I think you know the one in question. Yes, I think it's now Longo's or something. I'm not quite sure.
I remember the old hall there. Yes.
Yeah. So we became a branch, and of course, just as a matter of interest, there at present time in Ontario Ancestors, there are 34 branches and SIGs, or special interest groups.
Okay.
So we've really expanded quite a bit, as you can imagine. I would say that makes Halton Peel one of the maybe earlier branches, but not that much. I'm sure there are others that are older than we are.
Right.
About the founding members, none of who, well, this is way before my time. Eric Blaney was one, and of course Brian Gilchrist, the late Brian Gilchrist, was a founding member.
Didn't realize he was involved way back then.
Brian was doing genealogical research when he was a child, practically speaking. Have you never heard him tell the story of how he got involved in genealogical research? Apparently, this happened when I think it was his grandfather died.
Okay.
And he asked to see the death certificate. And it wasn't filled out properly. And I think he said he was 9 years old at the time. And he actually took the funeral director to task about it. So anyway, that was Brian. Other original members included June Cuthbert and Janet Reed and June Pert, Alf Murray, and Alan Curry. And I think most of them have passed away now, which is the sad part about it. There were, some of you were asking about some of our long-serving members, and I keep thinking, I was getting some feedback from Jane Watt about this, because Jane qualifies as a long-serving member because she has 41 years under her belt. That's quite something.
That's a pretty long tenure, yes.
That's a pretty long time. And the sad part about it is the names that we remember, they're all gone now. I mean, I think of Brian, for instance, Bob Crawford.
Oh, yes.
Russ Cooper.
Yeah.
Russ was one of our chairs. Bill Britnell, who did a tremendous amount of work with recording cemeteries. We worked with his work, his records as a basis, along with, of course, Perkins Bull.
Yeah.
You know, particularly in this area. Alex Cook, who was a long-term serving member, and he's also passed away, but he left us an incredible bequest, which we'll get into further.
Yeah.
We're able to carry out projects with. And among those that are still with us, and I think of when we see them when we used to have meetings, Al Fisher from Brampton and Dale and Ann Ward,
yeah,
who before they even married were recording cemeteries together. So yeah, it's quite a long list. I mean, I could not pass this up because you will know this person, but one of our current long-serving members, and now an honorary member for life, is Lois McKinney.
Oh, yes.
Streets Historical Society.
Yes.
Very active. Still sends Kathy Baker or stuff for the newsletter.
Yeah,
she's really something. Yeah.
There, you know, for people who might be watching this show and not having a connection to Halton Peel, there are some giants in that list in terms of contributions to local history over time.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, not just Halton Peel. I mean, predominantly focused on the creation of in the early years of Halton Peel, of course, but many of them went on to work with, you know, the regional archives and local historical society.
Exactly, yeah.
And you know, Heritage Mississauga as well, and so you know, a lot of those people were connected in those very early years of celebrating and recording our history, and things which I know you carried on, but also those records that were created became part of the collections we share and we
that's right,
rely on. And I know myself, I mean, a lot of those names, whether it be, you know, God bless Brian Gilchrist and Bill Britnell in particular, the work they've done, and, you know, recent people that have recently passed in the not so distant past. But you know, they created these records that have become cornerstones of some of the collections and information that we continue to rely on.
I couldn't pass this up without mentioning Russ Cooper.
Yes, yes.
Whose photographs are amazing. And just this morning, I saw a photograph of Russ's on I think was it you guys that put it on?
I don't.
Or is it maybe it was PAMA?
Okay.
But it was Museums of Mississauga. But it was because of Prince Philip.
Yes.
When he visited I think Brampton or whatever, and no, he visited whatever the visit was, but I mean, he was there. That was one of Russ Cooper's photographs for the Toronto Telegram. Remember the Telegram? You know?
Right.
Yeah, so
just, and that, you know, you can't shake a stick and peel and not find a Russ Cooper picture of some sort.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just, you know, absolutely remarkable. The collections that were created in those early years of the organizations, and that brain trust that came together to kind of create and celebrate. And you know, we from failing hands, you pass the torch. You know, like there is that new generation, and I don't know if you ever look at yourself as a new generation, but you picked up that mantle and well,
I know you were going to ask me this anyway. I actually joined OGS and Halton Peel Branch in 1985.
Good.
But I was kind of you know, not really involved to that extent, as it were, until probably 10 years later, when I was attending meetings more regularly. And in 1995, Russ Cooper asked me to go on what was then called the executive, which we now call the council.
Yep.
So I can thank Russ for that. He created a position called awards coordinator, and I'll speak about that later. And that's how I got involved, and have been on the council ever since. So there you are. That's me catching the falling torch.
You always have to be careful when you step forward, because sometimes you never step back down.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you have, I remember having an interview with someone in Streetsville, and he'd been a resident of Streetsville for 45 years. And he said, some of my friends still refer to me as the new guy.
Yeah, right. He didn't come with Timothy. What can you expect?
So just, in terms of just giving a background to the genealogical, to Halton Peel as well, what is it Halton Peel does from a program perspective, from collections? You referred to meetings that you meet in normal times we meet, but
oh yes,
a walkthrough of kind of what Halton Peel does.
Well, of course, Halton Peel's the main purpose is, of course, to help and assist people with the genealogical research in the former counties of Halton and Peel. And that's our main, focus. Another one, of course, but which is part of our being a part of the Ontario Genealogical Society, or Ontario ancestors, is to take care of cemeteries. It's our mandate to record and first of all, to find and record cemeteries, no matter where they are, and make sure that everything's okay as far as that, and also to publish the transcripts of those cemeteries. And we've expanded beyond that, of course. As you know, there's a number of these things online now, photographs with the recordings, which we did quite a few for Canadian headstones. But unfortunately, Canadian Headstones is presently undergoing some work on their website, so we're not able to submit material right now, but there's a great deal of material that we have put on there as well. For example, St. Mary's Cemetery, Port Credit, it was completely photographed a few years ago and put on Canadian Headstones. We have meetings, as I said, we usually meet monthly, except during the summer and in December. And we try to get interesting speakers that would appeal to people. We've had trips, as not that we have necessarily organized them, but our members have gone on trips to the Family History Center, for instance, at Salt Lake City. I've unfortunately not been able to do that, but maybe one day again. We have a library, a very good library actually, which is unfortunately no longer, not at present accessible, but it's at the Four Corners branch of the Brampton Public Library. And we have a newsletter.
Yes.
We publish the newsletter, well, I think it's about 4 times a year now. Kathy Baker is our indomitable newsletter editor. I write an article, regular column for it, which I call Cemetery Corner. Naturally, trying to cover both Halton and Peel as well as I can. We have queries, of course, in the newsletter. We definitely, invite people to give us their queries, and we do research. Kathy, let's see, the research comes in. Fran Murphy does research for Peel. If it's a cemetery question, she'll refer it to me. And Jane does mainly most of our research for covering both Halton and Peel, actually. We do not charge for the research, but we do appreciate donations.
You know what, and I rely on, myself as a community historian, I rely on the brain trust, the expertise, the resources, and frankly, the camaraderie to share and explore history. I mean, I remember following a thread with you on Victor Vignali.
Right, yes, and that was purely by accident. I think you brought it up to me, didn't you?
Yep.
And the fact that he was from Trinidad and so on, and then I, started researching him. I didn't realize he'd gone to Jamaica, which was interesting as well. Yeah.
We may, just as an aside, but there may be a road coming with his name on it in the near future. So,
wow, that would be interesting.
Well, I'll keep you updated as we go on that.
Thanks, man.
And just that you keep the two counties or the two regions, Halton and Peel. You keep those ties because you alternate your meeting locations, do you not?
So, that is right. We meet at the Oakville Public Library. When we're keep in mind, this is when we're meeting. This is pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID as well. So we have a couple of meetings a year at the Oakville branch of the Central Library there, and the others at the Four Corners branch up in Brampton. One of the things that we really enjoyed doing was what we called our Genealogy Roadshow, which we usually did in May. And that's when some of our old council members or general members with expertise would, answer questions from anybody. That's another thing I want to make clear. Our meetings are not limited to members only. Anybody can come to our meetings. Yeah. And on the subject of connecting with us, we have a Facebook page. We're on Twitter. Don't ask me about that because I'm not on Twitter. Okay, I don't tweet, but we have a Facebook page, and Kathy, I think, is responsible for our Facebook page, and Laurie Kay, our past president, does the Twitter account. Yeah. And again, you don't have to be a member to join, and we'll answer questions on that as well.
And at the end of this episode, we'll share the links as well, so there'll be a way for people to connect as well.
Okay.
So meetings are open. You don't have to be a member.
You don't have to be a member, and you don't have to pay to come to the meeting either. Some branches do charge, apparently. But no.
Free entertainment on it's a Sunday, right? You meet on Sundays, right?
We meet on a Sunday.
Normal.
We did meet on a Sunday afternoon at 2:00 in the afternoon. Our meetings would run from 2 to 4. Yeah. No, we're not entirely dead now, because we have been meeting via virtually, as it were.
Yeah.
And so if you go to our Facebook page, you'll see where our next meeting is. I think the last one we had, which was a week or so ago, was Catherine Lake Hogan, and speaking about how to do research in the 20th century, because of course, with privacy issues, that's not always so easy. And I think Dave O.B. is going to be our next speaker, which would be, I think, probably the 3rd or 4th Sunday of the month. But it'll be on our Facebook page. Dave is going to talk about migration and in Canada and so on. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and like I said, we'll share those links, but I know myself, I've been a speaker a few times over the years, but
absolutely, yeah.
I've also attended, although I will admit I don't attend as much as I would like to. Usually kids' commitments on weekends are more of a challenge, but the fascinating camaraderie. I come back to that word when I come to the meetings. I see this kind of this network of people that are enthusiastic about history and family and those are values we can all connect to. Doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah. To me, I've always got a warm place in my heart for Halton Peel, and it probably doesn't hurt that I've known a few of you over the years, and you've been all tremendously supportive of me, and so it's kind of like family too. So, I know I want to touch on the cemetery project, but let's jump ahead for one. You mentioned the newsletter. What is the name of the newsletter?
It's called Halton Peel Connections. That's K-I-N capitalized actions. So connections, you get.
And this is something that people, is it online through the website? Like, are people able to view it?
Okay, here's the thing. The past issues of the newsletter are available on our website, but they're in the members only section.
Okay.
This is how we encourage people to join.
Well, you become bonus by joining.
Exactly. If you are a member, you get the newsletter pretty well electronically these days. We probably send out maybe a dozen printed copies to those who do not have access to the internet or prefer to have a physical copy in their hands.
What about have you done any other publications outside of the newsletter? Like, is there any publication history within the branch itself?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there are, of course, primarily cemetery transcripts. Those are what we've got, and all of our publications are available on the OGS website under Marketplace.
Okay.
So if you go to Marketplace, you'll see those branches that have publications for sale, and you can click on it. They're all pretty well digital downloads now. Right. So I should have thought about getting you some titles, but I mean, people who have written for us. Yeah. I include Trudy Mann, the late Trudy Mann, and Jan Spears Duff.
The churches and cemeteries of Peel, I believe, were Trudy Mann worked on that.
Trudy Mann did the places of worship, and she also did her most, I think, useful publications were sources of records, where to find them in the different townships. Okay. So she's done them for Toronto Township and Chikusi and Toronto Gore and Esqueezing and so on. Also, she and Jan published People of Peel and People of Halton. Yeah. And these were like indexes where you could find, this is before the days of the internet. So it was where you could find information elsewhere, like in archives, for example. Yeah. There were, I think, publication of baptisms or other such, records at St. James Cathedral, for example, which weren't that easily accessible, as it were.
No, and they're wonderful resources, but we have them in our library.
Yeah, you could probably tell me what they all are. I didn't make a list. Dang it. Sorry.
But we'll put a link to that as well. And again, when
Great.
libraries reopen at the Four Corners branch in Brampton, Halton Peel does have a collection there.
Yeah, it's for use in library only. It's like a reference library, and it's on the second floor. So you just go and ask for it. But I think you can find them. Pardon me. You could find them on the Brampton Library website. If you were just to search by Halton Peel Branch, you probably get them all coming up. If you do like a keyword search.
Well, I know in the past I can lose myself happily for hours in there, so it's kind of
Good. Yeah.
So the one of the things I'd love to spend some time on it because I'm most fascinated by it. But you yourself as a cemetery coordinator, but the whole project around transcribing cemeteries, researching them, making sure that they're lost cemetery. People don't think of lost cemeteries, but we have. There's more than a few. Wondering if you can walk me through kind of what that project is and what you do with it, if that makes sense.
It's interesting. I wasn't involved with cemeteries back in the days when it was the good old writing them down as you went along thing. They would set up, there'd be like a cemetery recording day. And you'd pick your cemetery, you'd go out there, take your snacks and all that. Because it usually was a hot day because you're doing it in summer, right? And you'd have a clipboard, and depending on the size of the cemetery, you'd be assigned a certain section, and you'd very carefully transcribe what was on the stone, you did not include the verses. Like the information that was transcribed was to do with the names, dates of birth and death, and so on.
Yeah.
And if the person, say, was a native of Armagh, Ireland, you put that sort of thing in. But if you had a verse about you are gone and all that stuff, we didn't put that on.
Yeah.
Which is different now from how it's done online when you see it done on Canadian headstones where they transcribe everything. So one person would go around transcribing, and then another person would take the transcript afterwards and check it to make sure that it was correct. And then that would all be collected, and our cemetery coordinator, back in those days, it was Ron Hibbert and his wife Nora, and he would type it up in WordPerfect. Okay. And then eventually, we would put together there'd be a history of the cemetery, whatever we could find out about it. We would go looking if it was attached to a church for burial records, which would also be transcribed as well. And then index it and so on, and eventually it will be ready for publication.
Right.
Now, with the advent of Canadian headstones, when we first got involved with Canadian headstones, when it was still being run by Jim McCain, before he turned it over to Ontario Ancestors, we'd go out with cameras and we'd take photographs of the stone, and then we would upload that to Canadian headstones with a complete transcription of what was on the stone. And it was a lot easier to transcribe from that to create the document, because you were doing it at home in front of your computer. You could enlarge the stone if you had to, it's the picture and so on. And you weren't suffering from the heat or anything like that. It was really very useful. We'd like to get back to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how do you go about? This is an attached question, I guess, if you will. But you research a cemetery or you're starting to research a cemetery. How do you go about finding out information about the cemetery itself? Like, what kind of resources do you consult? Now, you mentioned church records.
Well, of course, one of our main ones, especially in Peel, was Perkins Bull. You've got to give William Perkins Bull credit for that. I mean, what he did for the history of Peel County and the cemeteries, I don't think any other county in Ontario has anything near that. We depend, we did depend on Ontario Genealogical Society, but also because they have a cemetery, a whole section devoted to cemeteries. Marjorie Stewart is one of the outstanding members of that, along with Diane Clendenin. And they would, I think, operate, we used to operate, I mean, it was called the Registrar of Cemeteries. It's now the BAO, the Bereavement Authority of Ontario. And I don't know how, honestly, I don't know how people get this information, but quite often there's history somewhere, especially when it comes to development.
Right.
You're all set to develop some area, and then you find out, okay, there's a cemetery there, even though there are no stones or whatever. But with the whole idea of cemeteries, as I said, we depend on the OGS because each cemetery was given a unique number by the Ontario Genealogical Society. Then we would assign ourselves, we would assign a number, an alphanumeric. So for example, if you took, say, like Dixie Union Cemetery, say, that would be PCTO for Peel County, Toronto Township, and the number, I think, is 20 or something like that. If it was Toronto Gore, it would be PCTG.
Right.
And then for Halton, it was HC, and then NA for Nassagaweya, or NE for Nelson, and so on.
Right.
ES for squeezing. So that was how we would number them. And of course, there would also be another number that the cemetery would have. If it was a registered cemetery, it would have a number specific to it from the VAO, as it is now called. I have a note here saying that we have identified 219 cemeteries in both Halton and Peel. And we've actually recorded and published 200. And that's not counting the unregistered cemeteries for which there are no burial information or anything. We don't know anything about them.
Right.
Talking about cemeteries, we know for sure are cemeteries.
I'm thinking there's
some of them are unregistered, but they do have stones. It's just that nothing's been done about registering them.
I remember a couple of names of these forgotten cemeteries that keep up. There's the Carefoot Cemetery and the Grogan Cemetery, where we have references to, but no evidence of. And
Carefoot and what's the other one? Yeah, this escapes me for the moment. Denise and I have brought that one back and forth, but there's absolutely no information about them. And the same with Grogan.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it exists.
Yeah.
You know, but it's on our list.
Reference to, but that's about it.
Probably we actually did a publication I put together, which called the Cemeteries of Halton and Peel, and it was about those cemeteries that had no stones, and but we knew there were cemeteries, but they had a history.
Right.
But rather than publish it with no information, it seemed like a bit of a waste. And wanted to pay money for a cemetery, it doesn't have any names in it, So we did one. I'm going to be working on volume 2 because there are a number of them still. I think Carefoot and Grogan will probably be in those as well. There's a Barber Cemetery, for instance. That's another one in Toronto Gore, I guess, which we know nothing about again. So I wanted to talk a bit about what we've done, some of our past projects and highlights, as it were. Once upon a time, the branches of OGS were organized into regional systems. They aren't anymore for some strange reason. But anyway, Halton Peel Branch belonged to Region 5, which included Simcoe Branch, York Branch, and Toronto. And we would take turns every year to have a regional conference, which we called a colloquium. And we, of course, Halton Peel organized when it was our turn several of these, and they were usually held in Oakville at the Maple Grove United Church. I was involved with some, and so were many of our others, like Al Fisher, and people who eventually became, chairs of our branch. Now, I'm also proud of the fact that Halton Peel Branch has actually hosted 3 out of the annual conferences. That was back when branches were hosting them. And in 1984, there was I guess it was the American-Canadian sort of get together. The Yankees are coming, to deal with, immigration across border, as it were. In 1984, that was at Erindale College. And then again in 1999 in Toronto, or finally 2009 at Sheridan College. But the conferences are now being organized by the society itself because with help of the branches. But it's an expensive proposition, as you can imagine, and it's probably easier if the branch, the Ontario Genealogical Society organizes it. Which our first one will be this coming up. It's coming up very shortly. It will be virtual. Things have changed, haven't they? Other projects that I'd really like to talk about, Matthew, and I think you'll appreciate this, the fact that I mentioned Alex Cook to you before.
Yeah.
And Alex left us a considerable bequest, which was to be used on the condition that we use in projects to assist people with their research. And so in 2010 to 2011, we funded a project by the Halton Hills Public Library to organize, to digitize the microfilm of two of their newspapers, the Acton Free Press and the Georgetown Herald. That was our first foray into newspaper digitization, actually. And these were eventually hosted on the Our Ontario website, which you're probably familiar with. And then I think you remember this, in 2010, we funded the production of Heritage Mississauga's book, Journey to the Past, The Lost Villages of Mississauga. We're very pleased to do that.
Yeah.
Still going strong, isn't it?
It is, and Bob Crawford was the one who unveiled it. So
absolutely, yeah. Good old Bob, really missed Bob.
Yeah.
In 2013, in cooperation with Mississauga Central Library, we contributed to the digitization of the old Port Credit newspapers on microfilm, which included the Port Credit News, the Port Credit Weekly, the Weekly, the Mississauga Times, and the first 5 years of the Mississauga News. And of course, these can be viewed on the public collections of Canadiana.org.
I was looking at the Port Credit Weekly this morning.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, and we do have a possible. I maybe shouldn't be speaking out of turn because nothing's actually been formalized yet, but we might do a similar project with Oakville Public Library, but that's not been formalized in any way at all. So, but I like to think that the fact that by doing those Port Credit newspapers, we've actually kickstarted the digitization project that Mississauga Library will be carrying on with,
right,
while they're closed for while Central Library is closed for revitalization.
They are tremendous resources, and
absolutely,
fantastic.
And I don't know if you're familiar with John Reed's blog, Anglo-Celtic Connections.
Yep.
And he frequently complains bitterly, because he's from Ottawa, and he complains bitterly frequently about the fact that Library and Archives Canada does nothing about digitization of newspapers, considering that they are the source of many of the microfilms,
right,
of old newspapers.
Yeah. Well, and we can only hope. Mostly, we can hope for the Streetsville Review. I mean, that's
with the Streetsville Review. I think we ran into a problem. Well, that wasn't really a problem, but a question of ownership.
Yeah.
Because that's where you get into the whole business of copyright and so on, and we like to be able to clear that with. We had no problem with the Mississauga News.
Yeah.
Who had taken over the other newspapers, like the Mississauga Times, for instance, which, that started out as Port Credit newspapers. But with Streetsville, it's a little trickier, I think, as far as that goes.
Well, hopefully that's something, because as a resource, that would be tremendous. I mean, that would
absolutely.
You think between the Port Credit Weekly and, of course, the Streetsville Review goes back even older, and just...
Yeah, because the Port Credit Review, the Port Credit News actually started in 1927.
Yeah.
Streetsville goes back to think about 1840 or something like
1843,
that.
1843, I believe.
1843. Yeah. Then there's a hiatus for about 20 years, and then they started publishing again. Yeah.
Just phenomenal, and just to have those resources now searchable and available, and
exactly,
they are gems. They really are. And so kudos to Halton Peel for bringing it to fruition. And
thanks,
we look forward to what the library system will be able to do in their digitalization efforts. In a future episode of Ask a Historian, we're going to be interviewing Dennis Frias.
Oh, good.
Stepped into some rather big shoes.
Oh, come on.
So I don't want to cut you off in terms of kind of projects you've worked on. Are there others you want to touch on as well?
No, that's pretty well it. I mean, I mentioned the fact, of course, that you can certainly purchase our publications from the Ontario Genealogical Society website, the marketplace. You asked me about what our future plans are.
Yes.
Who would have thought? Well, when you said future plans, I said, don't I wish? Just for the heck of it, I thought, I'm going to ask somebody who's been around a long time what they think. So I asked Jane. Jane what?
Yeah.
Okay. She gave me quite a laundry list, actually. So what do you think we would want to do after this is all over? We'd like to see each other again in person rather than via Zoom.
Yep.
I mean, you've heard of Zoom fatigue? I think anyway. And to plan events in real time, not virtually, that would be great as far as that goes. I mean, we'd like to go back to doing our monthly meetings, especially the Genealogy Roadshow. I mean, we encourage people to come, and you know, you don't have to be a member, as I said, just drop in. You make friends that way and help them with their research. That's the most important thing. Certainly, we'd love to be able to go to our Ontario Ancestors Conference in person rather than via webinars.
Yep.
And we would really, there and events we would, Jane mentioned this in particular, Heritage Mississauga events, doors open, all of that stuff, you know.
Actually, being out there in the community would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to be able to go out and do cemeteries once the weather is good, because we don't have to be together. I mean, you know, we can socially distance, wear masks if necessary, take pictures and so on. Except that I find that when I wear a mask, my glasses fog up.
I have the same issue. It's
Yeah, yeah.
but no, I mean, the return to normal, whatever that is, and whenever it is. I mean, we can all look forward to that. But at the same time, that there are numerous ways in which people who, you know, staying at home, or, you know, a lot of people being at home, has offered opportunities to engage in those thoughts, perhaps that time takes away from us in regular life, and that, you know, exploring your roots, exploring your ancestors, and, you know, your family histories and stuff. I'm sure there's not a small number of people that have turned to genealogy as a result of.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you're there still to answer questions. Your people can still connect with your resources. You know, if you ever can be curious about, hey, what's that church or that cemetery over there? Well, it's a good place to go.
Yeah, that's handy. I mean, I can answer questions about cemeteries that we have recorded, because I have all the material on my desktop. Yeah. Jane, I know, has an incredible library of her own. So she can answer questions, and there's so much more stuff online than there used to be, which is really very helpful as far as that goes. But it doesn't really take away from, you know, there's lots of stuff that's not online.
Oh yeah,
like at the Archives of Ontario, for example. You know, mind you, things that are coming up, for instance, the land records that are from on land that are online, though not that easy to access them. We have to know what you're doing. I think it would be nice once the libraries open up again for people to see what we have in our collection, which is very good. And you know, we have a number of family streets, you know, that people in Halton and Peel have published.
Yeah,
very helpful.
And they're tremendous records as well. But you know, maybe it's a thing where when the world reopens again, whenever that is, you know, you have kind of like community open houses. Hey, remember us? This is what we do. And, you know, come out
yeah. That would be great.
Yeah, I think we can look forward to that, and perhaps connecting to, you know, new audiences that previously had not engaged with collective organizations. So, you know, hopefully there are sunnier days ahead. I feel like we're you know, here we are in the midst of, you know, the next wave or challenge or whatever you want to say, whatever the right terminology is. But it does feel like we're turning a corner at the same time. So it's at least to me. Maybe I'm.
Well, we got to be positive, as our premier said. You know, let's get rid of the negativity, folks. So.
Well, Dorothy, over the many years that I have engaged with you, and I wish I had a date when I met you, but I swear it was end of the 1990s. I think I can't remember.
Don't ask me. I don't recall.
I remember walking into.
I feel like I've always known you.
I remember walking into the Canadiana room and you know, amazed with the resources, but amazed also with your reception, and yeah. You made me feel welcome, but at the same time you were very gracious with your time, with your knowledge, and with your passion for history. And you know, for someone who at that point was, you know, tiptoeing into that world, it was amazing to find people like yourself to help guide the ship, as it were, and feel like we were in good hands. And so you know, I appreciate that from, you know, a personal perspective, but just the work that Halton Peel has done, our daily resources. I have 3 cemetery transcriptions that I stole from the office over here at home with me, just stuff I was looking up, and so, you know, those are constant as well. And you know, Kathy Baker and Jane Watt, longtime community volunteers and a former co-worker at Heritage Mississauga, and we can go on and on with those lists of people that have been engaged and help celebrate and record the story of our community. So just remarkable resources, remarkable organization, and continued success and continued keep pumping out the cemeteries. They're like gold for me whenever I get them. It's like kid in a candy shop when I get a new transcription.
Thank you, Matthew, and we couldn't do it without you guys either. I mean, Heritage Mississauga, you do an incredible job of keeping heritage alive in Mississauga.
Thank you.
That's something I really appreciate. And you certainly haven't let COVID keep you down, that's for sure.
Well, it's a treasure, and of course, any good story builds on previous stories, and we all stand on the shoulders of giants. You reference Perkins Bull and Russ Cooper and Brian Gilchrist and others, and they set a chart, they set a path, and you continued that on, and we've continued that on, and we're always acknowledging those that set that path early on, and just remarkable resources. When COVID allows, encourage anyone to visit the Four Corners branch to see to peruse the local history collection there from Ontario Genealogical Society, from Halton Peel Branch, but also the resources that are available. Reach out to the branch themselves.
Absolutely.
Cemeteries, families, history is all around us, and it peeks through in so many different ways. It's absolutely fascinating. The stories behind road names and park names, and never mind what's a little cemetery on the corner. We get questions all the time in our office about cemeteries. Why is there a cemetery over here? Well, the answer usually is, well, the cemetery was there first.
Exactly.
And so they're just fascinating ways to look at our story and peel back the layers of the land, if you will, and see what's underneath. And so thank you, Dorothy, for your time and for your continued passion and enthusiasm for history. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for spending time with us this week at Ask a Historian. And thank you to Dorothy Kew of Halton Peel Branch of the Ontario Ancestors, formerly the Ontario Genealogical Society, for exploring some of the things that the Society does, both in terms of preserving history and in sharing the resources that they have collected. It's a fascinating way in which this group has looked to celebrate and promote and protect and preserve the stories of our past. So join us again on a future episode of Ask a Historian.